You pretty much know what you're getting yourself into when you sit down for a Guy Ritchie story. Twists, violence, probably some boxing, and of course gangsters. Well, Ritchie has created a spin-off series from his 2019 film The Gentleman for Netflix. It's called The Gentleman. That's right posh, ain't it? Eddie Horniman unexpectedly inherits his father's sizable country estate, only to discover it's part of a cannabis empire. Moreover, a host of unsavory characters from Britain's criminal underworld want a piece of the operation. Determined to extricate his family from their clutches, Eddie tries to play the gangsters at their own game. However, as he gets sucked into the world of criminality, he begins to find a taste for it. Now, this is the ultimate if you give a mouse a cookie scenario. After finding out about a massive pot operation running at his estate, Eddie gets involved, which then slowly and violently spins out of control, leading him from one complication to the next with consistently increasing danger and altercations. Now, this stars a bunch of talented actors, including Theo James, Kea Scodelario, Daniel Ings, Jolie Richardson, Vinnie Jones, Giancarlo Esposito, and Ray Winston. Pacing, editing, visual storytelling, they're all signature Ritchie. While he only directs the first couple of episodes, his fingerprints are all over the production. There are flashbacks narrated by voiceovers, typically informing the audience of how a scenario actually went down versus what we thought we saw, and then it's usually delivered in a snarky or sarcastic manner. Now, there is a lot of repetition when it comes to how each episode plays out, following a prescribed formula that shows Eddie and his family getting into a spot of trouble, then figuring out a clever way to get out of it. Now, this wasn't bothersome, but it can make the narrative predictable. James and Scodelario have excellent chemistry. There's a lot of sexual tension between them, heightening and exacerbating their working relationship. And these lead to endearing and funny scenarios that keep the story flowing while also increasing the connection to our main protagonists. Now, another excellent character in this is Eddie's brother, Freddie, played by Daniel Ings. He is pretty much the idiot of the story, but he adds a lot of ridiculous humor to each episode. He's very childish and can be grating, but because he's typically the victim of his own stupidity, it works to balance everything out. Now, my favorite character in the whole show is a perpetually high and wisdom-spouting pothead, Jimmy. He's played by Michael Vu, and he absolutely nails the part. I'd classify him as the fool for the story. I mean, he's overlooked in what he says because it usually sounds moronic and daft, but he's also perceptive, and it's hard to know what's going to come out of his mouth. I mean, he may spout off about a delicious banana milkshake, or give excellent guidance about a dangerous situation. Either way, though, Jimmy's an outstanding character and a huge bright spot within the cast. Now, because this is 8 episodes long, with each being about an hour, this is a chunk of time to binge. But I found that once I'd started, it was almost impossible to stop. While there isn't a ton of action, there is a lot of violence. And of course, then, the threat of violence. I mean, every bad guy that anyone encounters is just stalked to the teeth with some sort of weapon. And then some of them are exceptionally brutal, too. There are also just a ton of funny moments. Some made me laugh out loud, while others just amused me and then made me chuckle slightly. Like, there's this band of travelers who come into the picture. A big talking bookie, a vicious car dealer, and a religious zealot with a penchant for shotguns. Plus, then there's several more. They're all unique and intriguing, providing varied dimensions to the players. Now, I'd mentioned how because of each episode's similar formula, it can make story elements predictable. But that doesn't mean that the show can't deliver surprises. The blueprint for the show allows us to know when to expect a twist, but these usually come in the form of something unanticipated or shocking. The visual stylings in this, they are immaculate, with just about every scene looking cinematic and enticing. There are also a lot of different camera techniques employed to just keep what we see fresh, even thrilling. And for example, cameras are mounted to the outside of car doors, so for a continuous sequence, an actor will be in a frame when the door is open, and then as they get in the car and shut the door, the subject still remains in frame within new surroundings. Cameras, they're also attached to animals, weapons, each bringing odd and creative views. Okay, so I know I said earlier that I was fully invested almost from the get-go, and that continued throughout the show. But I can also acknowledge that some portions become a little repetitious, or maybe they're just too drawn out as conversations and interactions revisit many of the same themes and discussions over and over. Now, if you are going into this because you enjoy a ton of violence, the show delivers, but it doesn't always show us the exact point of impact of maybe a knife's blade or a bullet. I mean, we're still shown the aftermath in gory detail, and I think that makes the scene more effective, especially when, for like example, someone's about to have a shotgun to the face. As the camera will raise away from the victim's face, we can no longer see the weapon. So then we have to sit with anticipation at when the shot's going to come. Okay, so what happens if this is your first foray into the world of Guy Ritchie? Well, aside from being centered around high-class gangsters who immerse themselves in a world of drugs and violence, the presentation is executed in a fast-paced manner, complete with quick zooming transitions and graphics scribbled on the screen that reinforce what's being spoken. And while we encounter a lot of different gangster types, these are very different from the Goodfella personas that we see in American portrayals. There are some of those, but more often than not, the baddies here, they're dressed in tracksuits, not three-piece suits. And there's also a lot of info that usually comes at us all at once during the storytelling. But it is pretty easy to become acclimated to the style, especially because it remains so consistent. And that really is quite the feat here, considering that there are several directors besides Ritchie. But it was hard really to determine when he wasn't behind the camera calling the shots. I was impressed at the continuity the show was able to maintain, especially when compared to other shows that noticeably vary in their stylings from director to director. Now, I had a blast with this show. From varied characters to the twists and dry British humor, this was a ton of fun to engage with. There is a lot of predictability to the narrative, as well as having some drawn-out story arcs, but surprisingly, the series still manages to include unforeseen tangles that add increased stakes and excitement. The acting is wonderful, crafting personas that run the gamut from sophisticated and intelligent to knuckle-dragging idiocy. And while this does reach a satisfying conclusion to the arc, the story's left open for more should they choose to pursue it. And if they do, I am planting myself on the couch for another proper binge. There's a little sex and nudity, almost non-stop profanity, and a crap ton of violence. I give The Gentleman 4.5 out of 5 couches. I mean, seriously, if you enjoy violently funny British gangster stories, put this at the top of your queue. So are you a fan of Guy Ritchie's movies? Do you have a favorite? I mean, I'm partial to Snatch, but I also really love his Sherlock Holmes films. Let me know yours, though, in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.